I already have one of whatever you're selling. You said my name like you practiced it in the car. Marcus sent you.
I just want you to find out if I'm crazy. There's a difference, Ray.
He doesn't pay people to test me. He pays them to make sure I never find out the truth. There was a driver once. I never got to thank him. You went pale the second I said it. Say it was you, please.
The envelope was still in my jacket pocket when I knocked, and I could feel the corner of it pressing into my chest like something that wanted out. $1,100 in cash, that was the number Marcus had said, real slow, like he was reading it off the inside of his own skull. 1,100 to knock on this door, smile at the woman who answered, and find out how easy she'd fall. I'd told him no 3 times, then I'd said yes. I keep thinking about the gap between those two things, because that's where a man actually lives. Not in the no, not in the yes, in the part where he changes his mind and tells himself a story about why. So there I was on a porch I'd never seen, in a town I drove through twice a week and never stopped in, and the door opened before my knuckles came down a second time. She had wet hair and a cream-colored robe pulled tight, and a look on her face that said she'd already decided I was a problem. Bare feet on the doormat, one hand on the frame, the other holding the robe closed like the night was cold, though it wasn't. Behind her a lamp was on, warm and low, and a rug ran back into a hallway that smelled faintly of coffee and something floral, the kind of smell a house gets when one person has lived in it carefully for a long time. "If you're selling something," she said, "I already have one." "I'm not selling anything." "Then you're lost, which is worse because now I have to feel bad for you, and I don't have the room tonight. Try the next porch." She started to close the door. I should have let her. Every honest part of me wanted to let her, but the envelope pressed against my ribs and I heard myself say her name before I decided to. "I should tell you something about me first, quick, before this goes anywhere. I drive a transport van, not an ambulance, the slow kind. I move people who are too sick to drive, but not sick enough to scream about it. Dialysis runs at 4 in the morning, old men from the hospital back to the homes, where nobody's waiting up, women clutching paperwork in their laps like the paperwork is the thing keeping them alive. I work nights because nights are quiet, and quiet is the only thing I've ever been any good at. I've sat with a lot of people in the worst hour of their lives, and I've learned that the worst hour doesn't look like it does in the movies. It looks like somebody trying to remember where they put their glasses. It looks like a person apologizing to you for being a burden while you buckle them in. I say all that because when this woman looked at me, I had the very strange feeling that I had seen her face before, in exactly that kind of hour, and I couldn't place it, and that's a feeling that doesn't let go of a man easy. It sits in the back of the throat like a name you almost have. "I'm looking for Adelia Moreno," I said, which was true because that was the name on the slip of paper Marcus had pressed into my hand along with the cash, his handwriting slanted and careful like he'd practiced it. Something moved behind her eyes. Just a flicker. The kind of thing you'd miss if you didn't spend your nights watching faces for the exact moment they stop pretending. "You found her," she said. "Congratulations. Now who sent you?" Not who are you, not what do you want, who sent you, like she already knew somebody had, like she'd been standing inside that house for weeks waiting for a knock she couldn't name. "Nobody sent me," I said. "You're a bad liar. That's almost charming." She tilted her head, studying me the way you'd study a weather report you didn't trust. "Try again, and this time slower, so we can both watch you do it. And here's where I want to be honest with you, because I wasn't honest with her. Not yet, and the not being honest is the part I have to live with. The plan, the whole stupid plan, was that I was supposed to be a charmer. Marcus had laid it out in his truck 2 nights before, both of us parked outside the diner on Route 9, with the engine running for the heat and the windows fogging up, so the whole world outside went soft and gray. He'd said his girl, his fiancée, the woman he was about to marry, had gotten cold somehow, distant. He couldn't sleep on it. He'd lost weight over it, he said, and he had, I'd noticed, his face gone sharp in a way I didn't like. He needed to know if she'd stray, and he couldn't be the one to test her, and he didn't trust anybody in the world but me, and would I, please just go. Knock on her door and turn it on a little and see what happened. "You want me to hit on your fiancé," I'd said. "I want you to find out if I'm crazy," he'd said. "There's a difference. Ray, look at me. There's a difference." I didn't see the difference then. I see it now, clear as a windshield after the wipers go, but that's later. "Look," I told the woman, told Delia, "I think there's been a mistake. I think I've got the wrong situation entirely, and I think the kindest thing I can do is turn around and walk back to my van. There's no mistake. She stepped out just one step onto the porch and pulled the door mostly shut behind her like she didn't want the house to hear us, like the house had been through enough. You said my name like you practiced it in the car. You're standing too straight, the way men stand when they're carrying something they're ashamed of, and you keep looking at me like you're trying to subtract 20 years off my face and you can't get the math to come out. She folded her arms, the robe pulled tight. So let's save us both the evening. Marcus sent you. The name landed between us like a drop plate, and we both just looked at the pieces. I didn't say yes, I didn't have to. She read it off me the way I read it off the people in the back of my van when the doctor's words finally arrive and land. Of course he did, she said, and she laughed. But there was nothing in the laugh, just air leaving a room that had been closed too long. He couldn't come himself. He never can. He sends. That's his whole way of moving through the world. He sends a thing ahead of him so he never has to be the first one through the door. She looked at me harder now, and the wariness was changing into something else, something closer to grief, wearing wariness like a coat. What did he pay you? He didn't pay me, I said. Don't, she said. Please don't do that. Don't make me the only person in this whole thing who's telling the truth, because I have been the only one for 3 years, and I am so tired. You have no idea how tired. What did he pay you to do? So I told her. Standing on her porch with the envelope still pressing into my chest, I told her the number and I told her the job, the whole shape of it, the smile, the turning it on, the seeing how easy she'd fall, and I watched it land. I expected her to slam the door. I expected her to cry or throw something or call me every name a person keeps in a locked drawer for exactly this kind of moment. She did none of that. She just nodded, slow, like a doctor hearing a diagnosis she'd already drawn up in her own head weeks ago and was only now getting confirmed. 1100, she said. He always did love a round number that isn't quite round. A real round number, 1,000, that would feel like a decision. 1100 feels like a man who did some kind of private arithmetic and won't tell you what. She rubbed her face with one hand, hard, like she was trying to wake up from me. Come inside. You shouldn't hear the rest of this on a porch. The neighbors already think I'm a sad story. Let's not give them the ending standing up. I'm not coming inside. You drove all this way to ruin my life. The least you can do is sit down while you fail at it. I want you to understand that I'm not a man who goes inside. I move people across thresholds for a living, and I myself stay on the curb. I'm the one who carries you up the steps and sets you down and signs the sheet and goes back into the dark. Inside is for the people who get to stay. I gave that up a long time ago, and I won't bore you with how, but she'd already turned and the door swung open and the warm came out to meet me like a hand, and I stepped in the way a fool steps into water that's deeper than it looks because the surface was so still. The house was small and clean and full of the particular silence of a person who lives alone and has decided not to admit it to herself. One coffee cup in the drying rack, one coat on the hook by the door, a single placemat on the table squared up neat. She saw me notice all of it, one thing at a time, the way you'd read a sentence. He doesn't live here, she said, answering the question I hadn't asked and wouldn't have. We're engaged. We don't live together. He says it's because of the wedding. Bad luck to mix the households before the day. He's got a lot of rules like that, Marcus, a lot of old-fashioned reasons that all happen to leave him standing in a doorway he can walk back out of. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Sit. You're making the room nervous. I sat. She didn't. She stood by the window with her arms crossed and looked out at the dark street and started talking, and I understood right then that I had wandered into the middle of something that had been running for a long time before I knocked, a story already 3 years deep, and I was just the man who happened to open the last chapter. How long have you known him? She asked. Since we were kids. Same street. He pulled me out of a creek once when the water was up. I'd have drowned probably. I never let him forget I didn't ask him to. I heard how the joke sounded out loud in this room, and I didn't like it. He saved my life. That's a true thing. I'm not telling you it isn't. How old were you? She asked. 9. He was 10. He was always 1 year and 10 miles ahead of me on everything, and he made sure I knew it. Gently, the way you'd remind a dog whose yard it is. I rubbed the back of my neck. I went in after a baseball, if you can believe it, a cheap rubber ball that wasn't worth a dime. Water took my feet right out, and there he was on the bank, and he didn't even take his shoes off. He just came in after me like the water owed him a favor, pulled me up by the collar, and the first thing he said before I even got the creak out of my lungs, the very first thing was, "You're going to remember this. Not, are you okay? You're going to remember this." And I have. For 30 years, he made sure of it, and I let him. I looked at her. I never once thought until about 4 minutes ago that a boy who says you're gonna remember this before he asks if you can breathe might be a particular kind of boy. She smiled at that, a real one, brief and sad. He pulls people out of things. That's his whole gift, and it is a gift. I won't pretend it isn't. He shows up at the exact right moment and saves you, and then you spend the rest of your life feeling like you owe him a debt you can never quite finish paying, and he never reminds you of it out loud. He just lets it sit there in the room between you, getting heavier. She turned from the window. Did he tell you why he thinks I'm straying? He said you'd gotten cold. Cold. She tested the word in her mouth like a stone. I got cold. That's the version he can carry around without it cutting his hand. The truth is heavier, and it has my brother's name on it. She walked to a drawer in the kitchen, opened it, and took out a photograph, an actual printed one, which you don't see much anymore, the corner soft from handling. She held it for a second before she handed it across, like she was deciding whether I'd earned it. It was a man in a hospital bed, thin, gray, smiling. The way you smile when smiling costs you something, and you spend it anyway because somebody's watching and you don't want them to be afraid. There was a younger version of Delia beside him, leaning into the frame, both of them caught mid-laugh at something off camera. My brother, she said, Tomas. He was sick for 2 years, the long kind of sick, the kind where everybody gets tired, including the people who love you most, and they hate themselves for being tired, so some of them start coming around a little less so they don't have to feel it, so they don't have to watch. She took the photo back gently with both hands. Near the end, he was getting transported a lot. Dialysis, specialists 2 counties over, back and forth in the dead middle of the night, because the night was when they could fit a dying man in between the people they still had hope for. And the floor of my stomach went out from under me, slow, the way the ground gives way in a dream where you knew all along you were going to fall. Because I knew. I knew before she said it. That's where I'd seen her face. Not on her, on him. In the shape of his eyes in that photograph, the same eyes that had looked at me in the rear view at 2 in the morning and told me the count. 2 and 2, bottom of the 9th. There was a driver, she said. Tomas loved him. Used to talk about him like he was somebody famous. Said the man never rushed him, not once, even when Tomas took forever to find a word, even when the word didn't come at all, and they just sat there in the dark waiting for it together. Said one night when he was scared, really scared, the scared you can't hide anymore, the driver, I reached up and turned the radio to a ball game, and the 2 of them just listened, didn't talk, the whole way home, and it was the kindest thing anybody did for him in 2 years of people doing their best. Her voice had gone very quiet, almost nothing, almost just breath shaped into words. Tomas never got the man's name. He kept meaning to ask, and I never got to thank him. My brother died on a Tuesday, and I have spent 3 years wishing I knew who to thank, lying awake building the man's face out of nothing. She looked up at me then, and I watched her face do the thing I'd watched 100 dying faces do over 9 years of nights. The moment they stop pretending, the moment the act drops because there's no more strength to hold it up. It was you, she said. It wasn't a question. You just went white. You went white the second I said the radio. It was you. I didn't say anything. There wasn't a word in the language that fit the size of the room. Say it, she said. Please, I've waited 3 years to say thank you to a man with no name, and now there's a face in my kitchen. Don't make me beg the air. Say it was you. It was me, I said. I remember him. I remember the ball game. He knew every average off the top of his head. He corrected the announcer twice, and he was right both times. My voice did something I hadn't given it permission to do, a small break, the kind I usually swallow. He was good company, best company I had that whole year, and I won't pretend that's a high bar because I keep my own. I was sorry when his name dropped off my schedule. I didn't let myself know what it meant for a while. You learn not to ask in my work. You drive the next one. Then one slow night I let myself know, and I pulled over and I sat there a while. She sat down, finally, across from me. She set the photograph face up on the table between us, like a third person pulling out a chair, and for a minute, neither of us said anything, and the lamp hummed its small electric hum, and outside a car went by on the wet street and didn't slow, and the whole world kept being the world, while something rearranged itself in that little kitchen. So now you understand my problem, she said. I don't think I do. I understand a beautiful thing. I don't see the problem yet. You will. She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist, quick and businesslike, a woman who had cried on a schedule before and knew how to keep moving through it. Marcus didn't send you here to test whether I'd cheat. I don't think Marcus has ever once been afraid I'd cheat. Marcus sent you to find out if I'd recognize you. I sat with that. It didn't make sense, and then it started to. The way a shape comes out of the dark as your eyes adjust, and I did not like the shape at all once I could see it. "Why would he care if you recognize me?" I said. "He doesn't know about the van. He never met your brother. He told me that himself, that he never met you until after." "He lies the way other people breathe," she said. "Without thinking about it, as maintenance, he tops the lie off the way you'd top off a tank, just to keep it running smooth." She leaned forward, both hands flat on the table on either side of her brother's picture. "Marcus drove my brother sometimes too, not for a company, for cash. He had a van back then before the new truck, and he took side work, the kind the real services wouldn't touch, the off-hours runs, the patients who'd been turned away because their paperwork was wrong or their money was short. That's how he found my family. That's how he found me. He came to the door one night with my brother safe in the back and a kind face on, and I thought, there is a good man, there is a man who shows up." The room was very quiet now, the kind of quiet that has a held breath in it. "And the last night," she said, "the night you remember, the night with the radio and the ball game, that was supposed to be his run. Tomas had the appointment across the county, the big one, and your company van, the official one, wasn't even supposed to be the one that came. Marcus was supposed to take him. He'd taken him a dozen times. Tomas trusted him. I trusted him." Her jaw tightened, and Marcus didn't show. The lamp hummed. The photograph lay between us with its two laughing faces. "He was 3 hours late," she said, and now her voice had gone flat and level, the voice you use for the parts that still cut if you let them have any music. "I ain't 3 hours." Tomas went into crisis in the front room. "I couldn't lift him. I called Marcus 11 times. 11, I counted them later. Off the phone, I made myself count them. Then I called everyone else, every service in the book, and most of them said no. Wrong hours, wrong paperwork, call in the morning, and one of them, one dispatcher at one company said, 'There's a driver out. He's 2 counties off, but he's the only one on tonight. I'll see what he says.' She looked right at me. 'And you said yes. A stranger off your route at 2 in the morning, a man not even on your list. You drove out of your way to come get a dying man you'd never met, and somewhere on that road you reached up and turned on a ball game so he wouldn't be afraid, and you got him where he needed to go, and you saved my brother's last good night without ever knowing whose night it was.'" I couldn't look at her. I looked at the photograph. "And Marcus," she said, "showed up at the hospital at dawn with a story, a flat tire and a dead phone and a stretch of road with no signal. He had a smudge of grease on his hand. I remember it. I remember thinking, how could I be angry at a man with grease on his hand? He tried, the world stopped him. And I was so frightened and so flooded with being still alive, with Tomas still alive, that I held that greasy hand and I thanked God for sending me a good man, and I never once asked why his phone had died at exactly the wrong hour or why the grease was only on the one hand. Delia," I said, "it was all I had." "He never knew it was you who covered for him," she went on, like she had to get it all out now or never. "He knew somebody did, a driver, a name he never got, same as me, same as Tomas, and he spent 3 years quietly terrified that one day that driver and I would end up in the same room and I'd put the two halves together, that the man who actually saved my brother and the man who left him stranded on the worst night of all our lives are two different men, and that I have been thanking the wrong one with my whole life, with a ring on my hand." She laughed, that empty laugh, the air leaving the room again. "So he didn't pay you $1,100 to seduce me. He paid you to walk up to this door and stand in good light, so he could watch from somewhere whether my face would do what my face just did. He needed to know if you were the loose thread, and you walked right up to me and pulled it yourself, and now the whole thing's coming apart in both our hands." I stood up. I don't fully know why. The body does things when the mind can't keep up. It just stands. It just moves toward the part of the room with the most air. "Where is he?" I said. "Check your phone," she said. "He's been texting you since the second you knocked. I'd put money on it. He's close. He likes to be close to the things he's most afraid of. He thinks proximity is the same as courage. He'll be parked somewhere he can almost see this house." She was right. I took the phone out and there were 3 messages waiting, stacked up, time-stamped a few minutes apart. Did she answer the door? "How's it going in there?" "Call me the second you're out, don't text. Call." I looked at the screen for a long time. $1,100, a man I'd known since we were boys with creek mud between our toes, a man who'd pulled me out of high water once and held it gently over my head for 30 years without ever once saying the words out loud, and I had never stopped, not once in all that time, to ask myself whether a man who always needs to be the one doing the saving might be the kind of man who quietly arranges to be needed, who might let a thing go wrong just enough that only he can fix it. "He's going to call," I said. "He's going to call," she agreed. "He can't stand a silence he didn't plan. Watch." The phone rang in my hand. Marcus. Of course, Marcus. I looked at Delia and she looked back at me, steady now, the wariness all burned off, replaced by something that had been waiting 3 years just to have one other person in the room when it finally got to speak. Answer it, she said. Put it where I can hear, and don't you dare lie for him, not even a small one, not even to be kind. You've spent your whole life driving people to where the truth is. Drive him, just this once. Drive him all the way there and don't slow down for the curves, I answered. I set the phone on the table next to the photograph between us so her brother's two laughing faces were looking up at it. Well, Marcus said, and his voice filled the little kitchen easy and warm, the exact voice that had talked me out of 3 no's and into 1 yes across a fogged-up windshield. She bite? Tell me she didn't bite. Tell me I'm a crazy man and I owe you a beer for proving it. She didn't bite, Marcus. A breath of relief came down the line, long and theatrical, a performance of a feeling. See, that's good. That's so good. That's all I needed to hear. I knew it deep down. I just had to. She recognized me, I said. The line went quiet, the kind of quiet that has a whole person standing inside it, very still. What do you mean, recognize you, he said, and the warmth in his voice had a hairline crack running through it. Now, the first one. You know exactly what I mean. The ball game, the 2 counties, the night you didn't show, and the grease that was only on the one hand. I kept my voice flat, the night shift voice, the one I use for telling a family in a waiting room that this appointment was the last one and there won't be another to schedule. You sent me here to see if she'd know my face. Well, she knows my face. She's known it for 20 minutes now. We've been sitting at her kitchen table having a real nice talk about her brother, about Tomas. You remember Tomas, Marcus? The man you were supposed to drive? Ray. Just my name. Quiet. Like a hand reaching out in the dark for any solid thing. He corrected the announcer twice, I said. Did you know that about him? You ever sit with him long enough in the back of a van to learn a thing like that? Because I did. One night. The one night you decided you had somewhere more important to be. You don't understand, I don't want the tire, I said. I drove dying men for 9 years, Marcus. I've heard every single version of the tire there is. I could say yours along with you, word for word, the road with no signal, the phone that picked the worst hour to die, save it, it's worn smooth. I looked at Delia. Her hand was pressed over her mouth, and her eyes were bright and fixed on the phone like it was a door she'd been standing outside of for 3 years, finally cracked open. She thought it was you all this time. You understand that? She has been thanking you with everything she has for the kindest thing anybody ever did for her brother, and you didn't do it. You let her thank you with her whole life for a night you slept through or hid through or whatever you did, and then you paid me $1,100 to make sure she never ever found out the difference. Is she there? His voice had gone small now, small and young, the boy on the creek bank with the water roaring, except this time I was the one standing on the dry ground watching, and he was the one going under. Delia, are you there? Baby, are you listening? She leaned toward the phone. She was crying openly now, the tears just running and her not bothering to stop them, but her voice when it came out did not shake at all, not 1 degree, and I will remember the steadiness of that voice until the day somebody drives me somewhere for the last time. You weren't late, she said. That's what you've never understood about me in 3 years. You think the thing I can't forgive is that you were late. Marcus, you weren't late. Late is an accident. Late is the world happening to you. You weren't late. You chose. Somewhere on some road that night, you made a choice, and I've never known what it was, and I've made myself sick guessing, and there is a man sitting in my kitchen right now who made the opposite choice for a total stranger for free at 2 in the morning and who didn't even keep the receipt. She drew a breath. He gave the receipt to me, just now. He put it on my table. You should see it, Marcus. It's a man's whole character, sitting right here next to my brother's face. Delia, please, if you would just let me come over there and— Don't come here, she said. Don't call again. If you can't face me for the ring, then send somebody for it. You're good at sending somebody. You've built a whole life out of sending somebody ahead of you into the doorway so your hands stay clean. She paused, and something in her went very gentle, which was worse than the anger, far worse. I used to lie awake wondering where you really were that night. Did you know that? 3 years of lying in the dark, running it. And I'm not going to do it anymore, not because I forgive you, because you finally answered it for me by sending this man. I don't need to know where you were. I know what you are. You killed my own wondering, Marcus, and that wondering was the last thing of mine you still had your hands on. Now you've got nothing of mine left. Delia, She reached over and ended the call with one finger, careful and unhurried, the way you'd turn off a stove you were done cooking on. The screen went dark, the kitchen was so quiet I could hear the lamp again, and the refrigerator, and her breathing slowing back down. She looked at the photograph for a long while, then she looked up at me, and I swear to you, something in her face had set down a weight it had been carrying so long, it had forgotten the weight was even a separate thing from her. She looked lighter and older and younger all at once. "You can go," she said. "You did the thing you came to do, even if it wasn't the thing he paid for. Maybe it's the thing you were always going to do if a door ever opened on the right night. You don't owe me a minute more than you've already given. You gave my brother a whole one once. That's more than enough for one family to ask of a stranger." I should have gone. The entire architecture of my life is built on going. You drop the person off, you set them down soft, you sign the sheet, you drive back out into the dark toward the next one, and you do not look in the rear view except to back up. You don't stay. Staying is how you end up carrying people who turn out to be too heavy to ever set back down. But I thought about Tomas finding his words slow in the back of my van, and me waiting, the engine ticking, the radio low between us like a third heartbeat. And how that was maybe the one time in my entire life I had done a thing exactly right, with no part of it left over to regret, and I thought about how I'd let Marcus pull me out of a creek when I was 9 years old and call it a debt for 30 years after, and how I had never once, in all the time since, let a single other living soul pull me out of anything at all, how I'd made sure of it. "Your brother," I said. "Bottom of the ninth, the night I drove him, 2 outs, 2 strikes, runner on second. He told me how it was going to end before it ended, called the whole thing, the pitch and the swing and the throw, and he was right too. He grinned at me in the mirror like he'd done it himself." She went very still. "He always did that," she whispered, "drove me out of my mind. Every game, every movie, he'd ruin the ending. He'd lean over and tell you the whole thing 2 minutes in." "He wasn't ruining it," I said. "I thought that too at first, told him so. He said, 'No, you've got it backwards.' He said he wasn't spoiling the ending. He was making good and sure he got to see it coming on his own terms before it could come up on him from behind. Said some people would always rather know the thing that's coming for them. Said it was the only kind of brave he had left." She laughed, and this time it wasn't empty at all. It cracked right down the middle, and something real came pouring up out of the crack. 3 years of it, more, and she put her face in both her hands, and her shoulders went, and I sat there and I didn't reach for her, because some things you don't reach for, you just stay near them, and staying near was the one kindness I had ever truly learned how to do without getting it wrong. When she came up for air, her eyes were wrecked and washed and clear, the way the sky looks the hour after a real storm. "Stay for coffee," she said. "Not for anything. Don't get a look on your face. Just coffee, just a cup, just 2 people and a kitchen for 1 hour. There's 1 cup in the rack, but I've got plenty more in the cupboard. I'm not as alone as I let this kitchen look. I just got good at one of everything so the empty spots wouldn't show." I thought about the envelope still in my pocket. $1,100 to walk up to a woman's door and be cruel to her in good light. I took it out, the corner of it soft now from pressing against my chest the whole drive, and I set it on the table next to the photograph of her brother, and I slid it across the wood toward her. "That's not mine," I said. "It was never going to be mine. There's no version of tonight where I keep it. Give it to whoever he used to drive for cash. The ones the real services turned away, wrong paperwork, wrong hour people. There's always a list of those somewhere in every town. Your brother was on a list like that once. Somebody said yes to him anyway. Pass it on." She looked at the envelope a long moment. She didn't push it back. She understood, the way some people just do in their bones, that taking a thing can be the bigger and braver kindness than refusing it. That letting someone give can be the gift you give them back. "1 cup," she said. "But here's my price. You have to tell me everything you remember about him, every single minute you had. You've got the last good night of my brother's life sitting up there in your head, the whole of it, and I want it. I want all of it, the averages and the announcer and the count in the ninth and the exact thing he said and the way the road looked. I've been living on one photograph for 3 years. You're a whole night I didn't know I had." So I stayed. The man who never stays, stayed. I told her about the ball game inning by inning and the batting averages he rattled off, like a man saying a prayer he still believed in, and the way he corrected the announcer with such flat certainty that I'd started, by the seventh, to believe the announcer really was the one who had it wrong. The lamp burned warm and low, the first pot of coffee went cold while we talked, and got poured down the sink, and a second one got made, and that one too. And somewhere out in the dark beyond the window, Marcus drove slow circles around a town he was afraid of, holding a phone that was never going to ring again, needed at last by no one on earth, which is the single thing a man built. The way he's built cannot survive. The way a fish can't survive the air. I don't know what finally became of him. I never went looking, and I never asked her, and she never offered. Some thresholds you carry a person across with your own two hands, and some you have to leave them standing on alone in the dark, because the only way across is a step that nobody can take for them, and they were never going to take it, and that in the end was the whole sad truth of him. But I know what became of me because I'm the one sitting here telling you all this 3 years on now, from a kitchen with 2 cups standing together in the rack and a photograph of a man I drove exactly one night taped to the front of the refrigerator where I have to see it every single morning before the coffee's even on. He corrected the announcer twice. He called the ending before it came, and he was right. The way the very best people are always somehow right in a way that ruins the suspense and saves the whole entire thing in the very same breath. So if somebody ever hands you a folded envelope and a round number that isn't quite round and asks you to go be cruel to a stranger, and you find yourself standing in that gap between the no and the yes, quietly telling yourself a story about why it would be all right, I'd ask you just one thing before your knuckles come down on the door. Ask yourself whose ending you're really being paid to ruin, because every so often the door swings open and the person standing on the other side of it has been waiting 3 long years for the exact truth you were sent there to bury alive, and you get to choose right there on the welcome mat with the warm air coming out to meet you which kind of man you drove all that way through the dark to be. If you've got a night like that somewhere in you, a night you did one small thing exactly right and never told a living soul about it, I would love it if you'd leave it down below, where the rest of us can sit with it a while in the quiet. And if this one rode home with you, you already know what to do. Give it a like and come along for the next run. There's always one more before morning. There always is.